Welcome to Integrated Wellbeing, the place for people grieving and the professionals who support them to come together to be uplifted, inspired, and guided by our guests. And today we welcome Dr. Aruna. Hello, Dr. Aruna. Thanks for joining us today.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
You're so welcome. Dr. Aruna is a board-certified adult and geriatric psychiatrist and founder of Trinergy Health in New Berlin, Wisconsin. She's also board-certified in Integrative and Holistic Medicine and has received training in Functional Medicine and Ayurveda, the oldest medical system in the world. So will you please tell us, Dr. Aruna, what is holistic health and how were you drawn to become a functional psychiatrist?
Thank you so much, Georgena. Wow. I think the best way I can describe my journey is that even without my own knowledge, I just kept following the trail that the universe was leading me on. And now when I look back, that's how it seems to have happened. I mean, nothing was premeditated or, I did want to become a physician. Psychiatry was something that I fell in love with as a medical student. And I desperately wanted to be a psychiatrist by the time I was in my final year of undergrad medical school. And I graduated in India, both my undergrad as well as my postgraduate education in psychiatry. And I think I had a much more holistic training, not in the way that I do now, but it was drilled into me that the mind is very ethereal. We think mental illnesses happen because of diseases of the brain and sometimes of the body, but we don't understand it fully. So we need to make every effort to rule out any disease that could be coming from the brain or the body and contributing to mental illness. But when I came here to the US in 2005, and I had to repeat my residency here, what I found that the mind and body were completely divorced. Like in India, if I did not complete a physical exam and a neuro exam for my patients, my psychiatric evaluation was considered incomplete. Whereas here in the US, if on my very first day, when I went to examine the patient, listening to their heart and, looking into their eyes, checking their pulse, I was actually stopped from doing it because I was told that it's medical legal liability. So this complete divorce of mind and body was very shocking to me. But during my residency and fellowship, I just wanted to be done with getting my degrees. I was already a practicing psychiatrist in India. I didn't want to create too many, problems for myself. Mm-hmm. But coincidentally, around the same time, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis. I was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian disease. I was struggling to get pregnant. I wanted to become a mom, and I was struggling with all these issues. And I was, going down the mainstream path where I had to take so many different medications, take fertility treatments, and also I began to develop symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis. And these were some of the diseases that my mom had suffered with in her lifetime. And there was so much of this genetic determinism and this idea that, this is all genes and nothing can be done. I was literally waiting for when I began to develop symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis, like with stiffness and pain in my hands in my early 30s. And the tests were still coming back negative. But I knew, my primary care physician knew, that with a family history, this is most likely going to turn into rheumatoid arthritis. And basically, she said, we'll wait for the antibodies to come back positive, then we'll start you on immune suppressant treatments. And I did not question any of that because I was doing the same even for Hashimoto's. I was simply taking a thyroid supplement, even though I was having this ongoing autoimmune condition, which was attacking my thyroid. And now it was the same autoimmune problems were now attacking my joints. But that is what I was taught. But really what happened, again, so many of these experiences. One day, my patient walked into my office for therapy, but she had this magazine, National Geography magazine, that talked about the high levels of environmental toxins in the blood of American man, women, and child as compared to the European counterparts. And when I read that, she gave me that magazine to read. She wanted my opinion about it. I had no idea about that. I had no idea about organic food. I had no idea about the traditional agriculture and industrial agriculture and farming. And she brought that book, that magazine. I read that article, and I was like, oh, maybe some of this is what I am struggling with. So made a change in my diet. And I mean, mainly switched to organic and really became conscious about the products we were using in the house. But when the children, this simply, I just went down this path. And with me becoming a mother, I became even more careful about what I was feeding myself, what I was feeding my children. And naturally, I took it to work, this kind of thinking.
Mhm.
Hey, if I want to, especially the second time I was pregnant, I was working at the hospital as an attending. And I remember one day I somehow did not take my lunch. And I was 4 or 5 months pregnant, easily showing my belly. I went down to the cafeteria, I stood there, and I was like, nothing seemed good enough to feed myself and my baby. And I thought, okay, if this food is not good for me and my baby, how is this food good for the people up in the unit, and what is it doing to their mental health? So I just Googled, and I started doing that. I started looking for information about nutrition and mental health, because in medical school and in residency, we are not taught any of this. Maybe, some vitamin deficiencies can cause mental illness. Yes, we are taught, but really exactly how that happens, and what about, okay, fine, vitamin deficiencies, what about mineral deficiencies? What about the microbiome? How does all of this play a role? We were not taught, but this curiosity led me to the Integrative and Holistic Medicine conferences. The first one I attended was in October of 2013. And that was the last year I went to any psychiatric conference. Because I did go to a psychiatry conference in May of 2013, and it was more of the same. It's chemical imbalance, it's this medication, or, it was so much hopeless, there was no real, back in 2013, this is what it was. There was no real, it was only about managing symptoms. It was no real pathway to really enhance people's lives and their health. But with integrative and holistic medicine, and the first thing I did was take that for my own health. So I started, incorporating learning Ayurveda and functional medicine. I went on a big smoothie kick for many months, really fed myself like power greens and nutrients. And I was also diagnosed with attention deficit disorder, and I was prescribed stimulants at one point in time. This was in between my 2 pregnancies. I do have that absent-minded professor kind of a vibe. I used to be more of a procrastinator, time disorganization, and all of these things were there. And when after my first daughter was born, I was struggling to manage everything. And I thought, okay, I have ADD. Let me go see what I was diagnosed with it. I met with a psychiatrist and I was prescribed Adderall. I took it for 1 week because I could not sleep at all. And then I stopped taking it. But when I went on the smoothie kick after my second daughter was born, not only did I lose all of my pregnancy weight, I actually came to my healthy weight, but my ADD went away. I became almost like an Energizer bunny. Like I wouldn't feel that slump in fatigue, in energy in the 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock time. And my joint pains went away. But most importantly, my periods regularized. So I had been diagnosed with PCOS actually in my teenage years. And I would get a period only 2 times in a year. And I would bleed for minimum 3 weeks, if not more. That was the severity of my PCOS. And every time I would go, and I knew, there was no real treatment for that. I knew reading the books that I was reading in my medical school. But even when I would go to an endocrinologist, they would say, oh, when you're ready to get pregnant, come to us, we will give you fertility treatment. So all these years of my physiology not functioning well was considered quote unquote normal. But when I went on the smoothie kick at age 37 and 38, my periods regularized. And now it's been 10 years after that. They are still regular. And I used to have, I mean, like now when I used to also get migraine headaches. So many of my, and all I did was cleaned up my diet, paid attention to the products that we were using in the house, our body care and all of that. So this was a very rudimentary way that I did this. But the more I went into functional medicine and Ayurvedic medicine, and my husband and I, we decided to open an Ayurvedic clinic first in 2014 when I was still undergoing my training. And so I began to undergo the detox treatments in my clinic. And for the first time in my life, after the antibodies became positive for thyroid, after nearly 15 to 20 years, my antibodies became negative, which is kind of at that point in time, it was unheard of. Like once you get diagnosed with an autoimmune condition with positive antibodies, there is no concept of that being reversed. And here I am, like in 2017, I think we opened the clinic in 2014, and I began to do these detox treatments very regularly. And by 2017, my antibodies came negative. So I'm like, I was also trying to do the same thing for my patients.
Yes.
And so in 2016, by then I had received enough education to really understand what I needed to do. So in 2016, I opened my practice. And I quit my job. And also because the mainstream industry, like I was working for a hospital, they were not ready to entertain the ideas. Like I would print out articles about, why we should do an elimination diet or eliminate dairy and gluten for patients with psychosis. Case reports were being published even in the mainstream journals in psychiatry, but people were not interested in exploring that. So I knew that if I really wanted to explore this avenue, I needed to do it in a pure way. So I quit my job in 2016 and started my practice. And there's been a lot of trial and error, but now we've come up with protocols that works for any mental illness.
Thank you.
So this is,
yes.
Yeah.
So you're truly a pioneer. And not only are you pioneer, what I'm hearing is you've walked the talk. You've really used this yourself, so you know it works.
Yes, yeah, it absolutely does. But still the propaganda from what we are taught in medical school and all of, like in the beginning, when I would see that my treatments were working and patients were actually getting better, I would be shocked. Really, this is working. But now, there is no question about that. I have put down my thoughts, my experience in a book. I'm waiting for that to be published. It'll happen all in good time. But really what I've figured is that there are only very handful of root causes. It's bad diet, it's trauma, especially early life trauma, and toxins in our environment, which result in inflammation, which causes all disease, including mental illness.
And that's what I appreciated as I was looking at your website, the quote, "There is no chemical imbalance causing mental illness. Let's look at the root causes in the gut-brain axis to heal and recover from the labels of mental illness." And so I'm very curious, what are the 3 root causes of an illness? You've touched on them, but let's be very specific for our audience.
So a big problem is our modern diet. I mean, we hear this from many different angles. We hear that our modern diet is not good for heart disease. It's not good for hormonal health. It's not good for immune health. And it is definitely not good for mental health as well. So our modern diet, what has happened is that number one, the ratio of omega-3 and omega-6, omega-3 is the anti-inflammatory fats, whereas the omega-6 is the pro-inflammatory fats. So this ratio has been completely turned upside down. So we are consuming a lot more omega-6s when we consume the standard American diet or the Western processed diet, which is made with seed oils, which is made with things like margarine. And we are moving away from things that people used to, from the more natural fats, whether it was coming from, organic eggs. I mean, now we have to call them everything used to be organic at one point in time. The hens they had a more natural variety diet of worms and some grains, but and those kinds of hens that are raised in a cage-free, free-range fashion, their eggs have more omega-3 fats in them. But in a factory farming where these hens are cooped up and they're given soy based meal, or I don't know, sometimes they say that even animal rendering is also being fed to these hens. I mean, I don't know how true. I mean, I don't want to be quoted on that, but definitely the soy and corn based diet that we feed the hens, and in the stressful situations that they're in, the animals are stressed and the eggs that are coming out are also not high in omega-3s. And also the amount of chemicals that are used in our farm, from pesticides to fertilizers, which are basically organophosphates, which are some of the very toxic chemicals that are known to mankind. Like I can tell you, like in India, being a farming country, one of the ways that sometimes farmers would attempt suicide, and the typical way that most of the farmers would attempt suicide is by drinking their own fertilizers.
Yes.
Or their organophosphate compounds, very, very toxic to us, and they're toxic to the environment, to the ecosystem. And when they get absorbed into our plants, they're toxic again because we are consuming them. Mm-hmm. But also pesticides and herbicides like Roundup, which is glyphosate, which leaches the minerals out of our soil. So in today's, even if we are eating organic food, our soil is depleted of essential minerals like magnesium. So we then have to take all these minerals in addition as a supplement.
Yes.
So we have destroyed our earth. So the number one root cause is actually the kind of diet that we are eating. And if you're eating a processed diet, which is, anything that comes from a manufacturing plant is processed, whereas if it's coming from a natural source, is more natural. So one of the big things that I recommend is that patients should go to a whole foods organic diet, which has been minimally processed. You get the meat, you bring it home and you cook it. You get the eggs, you make, you can eat eggs, including the yolk, and that's not going to hurt you. What about butter? Butter and clarified butter is better than margarine. Mm-hmm. I mean, these are truths and concepts that people knew, but because of the propaganda machine and because of advertising in corporate America, when I first came to the US, what was it? I can't believe it's butter. That was, why would you go for that when you would, real butter and clarified butter tastes so good, and it is so good for us.
Yes.
So now we hear about this Ozempic and Wegovy. Have you heard of these pharmaceuticals for weight loss? Mm-hmm. It stimulates this one receptor called GLP-1 receptor. It's an agonist. And this GLP-1, when the receptor is stimulated, we feel full and it reduces our appetite.
Yes.
Guess what else can stimulate your GLP-1 naturally? It's actually butter and clarified butter.
Oh, I didn't. I've never heard that.
When we eat good fat, clarified butter, which is known as ghee, is known to give us that sense of satiety or satisfaction and fullness. And naturally, we will not overeat. We will not overeat on healthy food. Yes. Because it's hitting these receptors, giving us that sense of satisfaction and satiety.
That's marvelous. So what I'm hearing is shop on the outside aisles of the grocery store. Yes.
Yes.
Avoid anything in a box.
Avoid anything in a box. Yes.
Yes. And the reason that I invited you to the program today is when people are grieving, they have very, very little energy. Their focus can be very interrupted. And so for people to know what is the most efficient way for self-care strategies to allow me to support myself as I move through and beyond this grief is what you're sharing today. So for everybody to hear that, it's so important. And then I heard the second cause is the toxic products in our home, as well as trauma.
As trauma, going back to how it ties in. See, grief is a loss, and when we lose something, it's very important to nurture ourselves and to nourish ourselves. I mean, the first thing is, I mean, whether, and it's not only grief, but even in terms of, especially for us women, when we are in the postpartum period, the first thing I say is ask for help.
Yes.
Do not, if somebody's making you a casserole or giving you something or offering to do your laundry, please do not say no.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's the one thing. And the second thing I often joke with my patients that the ultimate act of self-love is not masturbation, it's cooking for yourself. Just because
I love that.
We've again, a lot of it is the messaging that we have received.
Yes.
Oh, you don't have to cook for you. Look at that big shiny yellow M on the way. Just drive through and pick up a big map. No,
right.
That's not self-care.
Mm-hmm.
That does not. Big M, the yellow big M, is not going to put a smile on our face.
No.
If it's a smile, it's a fake smile. So really, we have to change that messaging to tell people when you are feeling down, whatever you do for yourself, in the which loves you, anything that loves you is what you need to do. Yeah. Fast food, alcohol, drugs, or even soft drinks, they don't love you or your body. When you take them, they attack you. So that's a no. That is not nurturance. That is not nourishing yourself. That is just an escapism. But if you spend a little bit of time and just baked some chicken with a few herbs, just put the whole slab of chicken breast, organic chicken breast, put some salt, pepper, some olive oil or clarified butter and some rosemary, stick it in the oven, bake it, and then get it out and eat it. That's going to be so much more satisfying, and it's going to give you the nutrients that you need.
Yes, it is. And the house is going to smell good. And the other thing is that you can see what you've done.
Yes.
And there may be some wonderful leftovers there.
Yes.
So all of those things add to the question that I teach people to ask: what's the most kind and loving thing I can do for myself right now?
Wonderful. I love that question, Georgena. I absolutely love it. Yeah.
Because what you and I both know is the body knows how to heal itself. So anyone listening today who may be on medication for a mental illness, please don't stop taking that. Just continue to listen more as Dr. Aruna shares more of what she does. Yes. And I, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, the body knows how to heal itself. I'm curious, can you demonstrated personally how your body healed itself, but where was that lost in our Western culture, Dr. Aruna?
Oh, I don't think that there was any evil scientist or anybody evil out there trying to know that. I think it's just the culture of convenience.
I love it. And yes.
Yeah. And also, post, with World War II, what happened was the men had to go off to war, and women were custodians of this kind of an information. But all of a sudden, women were called upon to work outside of the home and take over the responsibility of maintaining the family and the livelihoods and all of that. And even when the men came, this is my hypothesis. This is, I've thought about this long and hard. And when the men came back, then, that was the boom time, it was the prosperity time. And all of a sudden, the idea that, washing machines came in, so you don't have to wash your clothes. A machine can do that. And microwaves came in, refrigerators came in. And, so the idea that you don't have to spend time in the kitchen to make food that is going to sustain you. Like, if you look at human history, everything, the wars were fought, all of human history revolved around procuring food to survive.
Yes.
But somewhere in the 20th century, that turned to, working or making money, not to really have a good life in terms of the kind of nutrients and food-related resources that we can procure. But all of a sudden, it became about the next big car, next big home. And I've been, I was guilty of that. We have I live in Wisconsin, very close to the Illinois border, and there's an outlet mall here. I cannot tell you how many times when I first came to the US, I would I mean, there were times when I would go and buy 5, 10 Coach bags when there's a Thanksgiving sale going on.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It's ridiculous until, you know, and I used to get exhilarated in doing that kind of a shopping back then.
Yeah.
Until, you know, as I've grown older and looked at all of this and you know, and there's a lot of, you know, downsides to that kind of a behavior, over consumerism. And when we get sucked into it, the things that actually truly give us nurturance and joy, which is about an easy-paced life, spending time with loved ones, connecting with oneself, connecting with nature, living in tune with the rhythms of nature.
Yes.
I mean, now, how many times do we hear that teenagers especially are waking up at 12 in the afternoon or 2 o'clock in the afternoon?
Mm-hmm.
That is so completely out of sync with the natural rhythms.
It is.
And also, there's a teenage mental health clinic here. They publish an article. I mean, I get articles from them, their newsletters. They published an article which was basically saying that this is how teenage brains operate. That's just a load of BS. No.
Mm-hmm.
Go to any farming community where, whether it's a teenage boy or a girl, I mean, go to indigenous communities in the world.
Yes.
No teenager is waking up in the middle of the afternoon unless
Mm-hmm.
they are hurt and sick. No, they are waking up with the sun, going about their business, and then going to bed when the sun goes down.
Yes. I had a father recently say to me, my daughter is a vampire. She sleeps all day and is up all night. So that's that illustration of exactly what you said. But when you said we have become a culture of convenience, and it became really neat to be able to eat out or to have fast food. And so for us, what we're listening to right now as the community of people who are grieving and the professionals who serve them, we're looking at how we can move through grief being supported. And before we started today, you and I were talking about the fact of diagnosis is one of the 3 big D's that result in grief: death, divorce, and diagnosis. And so talk just a little bit about what happens when people come and they have a diagnosis, because what happened to me a couple years ago, Dr. Aruna, is a woman had experienced COVID. She then was in a state of experiencing long COVID, and it brought her into a state of grief because she was grieving the person she had been and was no longer able to function as. So one of the things that I am noticing in our culture is how often a person gets a diagnosis, but they move right into the treatment without pausing to take the time to grieve. Who am I now?
That's I love how you put that in together. You know, the 3 causes of grief is death, divorce, and diagnosis. Yeah, that's really beautiful.
And then we also have despair, and we have devastation, which can be anywhere from bullying and to mental, physical, emotional abuse, murder, rape, war, that severe trauma. And then the third one is the natural disasters. And we've seen so many. So I call them the 6 deadly Ds. Yes. But right now, let's circle back to what happens when people come to you and they no longer are the healthy person they were.
Yeah. So I do recognize that there is grief with many of the patients with regard to a diagnosis. I mean, I can tell you, in 2020, actually, one of a young woman came in to my practice. She had a diagnosis of schizophrenia. She had been hospitalized 2 times before. She had seen about 7 psychiatrists. And with the medications, she had put on like 60 pounds. So she came off of them, lost those 60 pounds. She's a young woman with 2 kids, and she wanted to have a 3rd child. And basically, the 7 psychiatrists that she saw before me told her that she was never going to be well. She needs to get used to the idea that she needs to be on medications for the rest of her life. And she was also struggling with infertility, and she was told that she will likely not have children again.
Mhm.
So, I mean, talk about the grief at that point.
Exactly. So many losses.
So many losses. But really, I mean, when at the moment I saw her, she was a walking, talking mess of inflammation. She had rosacea so bad, like it was like this big patch of cystic acne in the middle part of her face, very severe rosacea. So that's how angry her body was with everything that was happening to her. And she basically had Hashimoto's thyroiditis. She did have psychosis. I mean, I can see why she was diagnosed with schizophrenia. But to everyone listening today, I wanted to say that psychiatric diagnoses are simply symptomatic diagnoses. They're completely atheoretical. Like in this woman, yes, she was delusional. She was paranoid. She was also hearing voices. She was having her auditory hallucinations. Most of the times she was able to recognize that they were not real hallucinations, but she would lose insight into it. So she did qualify for a diagnosis of schizophrenia. And with the mainstream approach is to medicate with medications that are very harmful for the rest of her body. They caused her to put on like 60 pounds weight. I mean, how can that ever be normal or good for any other organ? The stress on her heart. So, but when she came in, we did our workup, and I knew that what was happening in her brain, the inflammation, what was happening in her skin, the rosacea, they were all linked. She had so many signs of gut inflammation. And I didn't predict that she would have thyroid inflammation, but I look for it in every person that walks into my clinic, because especially women, and with the toxins that we are exposed to, especially the forever chemicals, the Teflon coating of nonstick pans, they're extremely toxic to the thyroid and to our immune system. They're also toxic to our ovaries. So they cause a lot of problems. And every county in the US, in all 50 states, the groundwater in every county in the US has been found to be contaminated with these Teflon-like chemicals.
Oh my
So
word.
we are all exposed to it. So we don't know where exactly she got her, toxicity from, or the thyroid inflammation from. But when we looked for these things, she had thyroid antibodies, and so what? And again, all of this was just an indication that her immune system was it was like napalm had gone off in her body, and her immune system was attacking so many organs. And the beauty of this holistic approach is that we just have to do one thing. We put her on an anti-inflammatory diet. We gave her anti-inflammatory herbs and supplements, and detoxed her to help her eliminate the toxin that she had accumulated. And within a year's time, her rosacea went away. Her thyroid antibodies, after a few months, began to go down, and her psychosis went away. She did have OCD, and this was in 2020. So last year, she delivered a beautiful 3rd girl baby. And she is not on any medications. She's learning to play the piano. She is gardening. And she was the inspiration for me to write my book. And she has written down all of the recipes that helped her. And she's going to publish with me whenever we find a publisher. So her cookbook is going to be an accompaniment to my book.
How exciting.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. But I mean, to all listeners, I have come to realize that majority of psychiatric medications do not work because there is no chemical imbalance. That's just a hypothesis which was never proven. But based on this faulty hypothesis, a lot of research dollars were spent, and a lot of these chemicals have been created with the intention of relieving suffering, but it's not doing that. In fact, it's causing us more harm. So if anybody is on medications, please do not stop your medications, because there is a process to do that. We first have to heal the body. We have to heal the gut-brain axis. We have to remove the inflammation. We have to detox and provide certain supplements to enhance the functioning of your body. Then we introduce the taper.
So this is the second time our listeners have heard gut-brain axis. Can you say a little bit more about that, please, so people can understand it. We've been talking about it, but very specifically that term, please.
Yes. So before being exposed to holistic medicine and functional medicine and Ayurveda, the gastrointestinal system was just one other organ system in the body. I did not understand the connection with the brain. But in almost all holistic traditions in the world, whether it is Ayurveda, which is the Indian medical system that originated more than 5,000 years ago and has been continuously practiced even to this day. So we have Ayurvedic medical colleges, we have hospitals and treatment centers all over India. And even in Chinese medicine, in all of these traditions, they give a lot of importance to gut health, that, our digestive system, we should feel regular hunger. Appetite should be good. We should be able to digest our food, extract the nutrients, and poop every day.
Mm-hmm.
Like pooping anything less than one time a day, according to Ayurveda, is considered constipation, and that is considered the first sign of illness. It's not pain, it's not a rash, it's not a headache, it's not a delusion. When you don't poop on a regular basis, we are reabsorbing the toxins that should be eliminated. And it results in problems. But so now in holistic medicine, there's a lot of research that ties, we call it the gut-brain axis, it's the central axis. And it basically implicates the gastrointestinal system and the neuropsychiatric system. So because when we eat, the nutrients that we absorb are then used to make the proteins, which then become our hormones, our enzymes, our neurotransmitters, everything else. And it's these proteins that make us function as we should function. So if our digestion is affected and we are not absorbing the nutrients and eliminating the waste, this process of everyday functioning with this, which is the synthesis of various proteins, will not happen as it should. Mm-hmm. So really much of 70% of serotonin, which is implicated in depressive and anxious states, is actually coming from our gastrointestinal tract. It's not necessarily coming from the brain. And the other aspect to the gut-brain axis is the microbiome. We carry 3 kilos of bacteria, viruses, and fungus, and sometimes parasites that live in our large intestine. And this colony of organisms interact in a symbiotic manner with our systems, and they regulate our immune system. They actually train our immune system in people with a healthy microbiome. Because their immune systems are trained, they will actually have a better response to stress. They will also not have risk of allergies and asthma, because the bugs will train the immune system to not react to every pollen and dander and dust and mite. That's how, which is why babies that are born by C-section and are not breastfed are at higher risk of asthma, allergies, and eczema, because these babies did not get the beneficial vaginal bacteria, which babies, when they're traveling through the birth canal, they inhale it, they swallow it. So they basically get soaked in all these beneficial vaginal juice, which is teeming with healthy bacteria.
I've never heard that before. Thank you.
Oh, this actually in some hospitals now, I read this article a few years ago. Based on this research for C-section babies, what they're recommending is that you place a gauze in the birth canal of the mother. And as soon as the baby is born, they rub that gauze, squeeze it into the baby's mouth, into the nose, into the ears, into the genitalia, so that the baby gets seeded with the mother's microbiome.
How amazing is that?
Yeah.
Very, very
so that was a
amazing.
hypothesis. I don't know whether they actually did a study or not, but some people actually prefer to do that nowadays. So that's the microbiome. Then there's the gut-brain axis is a whole another, and at least a 3-hour topic. Love to get into it. But basically the idea is that gut health is central to mental health.
There we go. That's the gem. Gut health is central to mental health.
Yeah. And in fact, before we develop psychiatric symptoms, we will develop symptoms in the gastrointestinal tract. So I was just talking to a new patient who's signing up for my 6-month program. She's been diagnosed with PTSD. and she's in her early 30s. And when I was explaining my process and I told her this, I said, and this was just an introductory call. I was just trying to see whether she's a good fit for my program.
Yes.
And I explained the gut-brain axis, and I just told her, like, even before you ever develop symptoms of anxiety or depression, you would have had some stomach issues, stomach pain. And she was like, oh my God, Dr. Aruna, I cannot tell you how often I would have stomach pains as a child. And I was always told that those were nervous pains.
Interesting.
That is the first sign of imbalance that is happening in the gut, but that is happening from trauma. Even psychological trauma causes real physiological damage to the gut lining.
Would you say that again, please?
Yes.
And then
yes. So just psychological trauma, or being reared in a chaotic, unpredictable environment, or if your emotional needs were not met with.
Yes.
So it doesn't have to be physical trauma. It doesn't have to be sexual trauma. Even these subtle forms of trauma stresses the young child very much, puts that child in a state of hyper cortisol. The adrenal gland releases cortisol all the time.
Yes.
And that damages the gut lining, beginning the pathway for inflammation to set in. So when these children are complaining of stomach pains, when they are anxious, it's not that they're imagining the stomach pain. No, it's actually happening to them.
That's amazing. And in my training, Dr. Aruna, it's the body tells the truth and its language is metaphor. So when someone has something going on in their stomach, we always invite them to consider, what can't I stomach anymore?
Yes. Yeah.
And so that was an amazing example that you just shared with us about young children.
And also, I've also thought, I do think about illness as an invitation to dig deeper. Illness is a metaphor. So from that lens, why did I develop thyroiditis? Because growing up in a patriarchal family, there was a little bit of abuse and trauma for me also. I couldn't really speak my mind. And then as I began to explore this holistic approach, again, I was asked to shut up, which is like really.
That's right.
Yeah. I've thought about it. So then when I realized that I needed to speak my truth, I'm like, I am inviting my thyroid gland to heal itself even more.
Exactly.
So
I experienced the same thing. So I have this lovely scar, and half my thyroid was taken out. And so I wear pearls.
They look lovely on you.
Thank you so much. Well, I understand that you're developing a course for patients. Will you tell us about that, and when will it be ready?
Oh, tomorrow is my webinar actually, but it's ready. This is the same program that I have been offering to patients in person, when they come and see me in the clinic.
Yes.
But actually, in fact, speaking with you and with our good friend Paula Fontanelle, that is what literally towards the end of last year, I was like, I need to do something so that I can work with people outside of Wisconsin. And when I went to India, I had people reach out there as well. So I was like, what can I do to make it more accessible and online? And of course, one of the blessings of COVID is that we have adapted everything to the online world. I've translated everything that we do in person, and we're doing it in this in the online medium. And it is a 6-month program. We start off with the consultation. That's the focus in the first month, consultation and giving the diet and lifestyle change plan. The second and the third month is going to be focused on incorporating these inputs, along with we begin the process of psychotherapy, which is going to be focused on shedding the victim mentality, radical self-responsibility and ownership, and practicing self-worth. So these are, we are all traumatized, Georgena. We all are. We all are.
Indeed.
And also grieving, For me, it was grieving, not only the all these diagnoses that I had. Infertility was a big one for me. And when I was going through those treatments, it was as if the universe was lining up all the pregnant women in front of me. All I could see was that.
That happens so often.
Yes.
And it's heartbreaking.
It is. And but really a big grief for me was loss of a childhood that I deserved. I never had the childhood that I deserved. And so all of these things, yes, bad things happen to us. But as adults, we have the right and the responsibility to overcome that.
That's
Nobody
right.
else is going to do that. So we focus on this in the second and the third month. Fourth month is going to be about detoxification. We do Ayurvedic detox. It's a self-guided, home-based Ayurvedic detox under our guidance. So it's a self-paced, guided home detox.
Excellent.
And in the fifth and the sixth month, we help people transition back into their lives and out of our programs. So this is a 6-month program that we are offering.
Good.
And we are the only coaching program that includes the supplements that are required for for people to become healthy. Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad that you have this available to people. You explain it so well, because one of the things that happens to people when they've had a significant loss is their brain is flooded with cortisol, and so much happens. So I'm intending that people listening today will realize, oh, that beyond being in therapy, beyond saying yes to people offering for help, there's that support for your body. And you have this program for them. I can't thank you enough for being who you are and what you're doing in the world. It's it comes back down to the basics. As human beings, we've been hunter-gatherers. It's time to go back to the kitchen. And it's so interesting because how many people have parties that end up in the kitchen?
Yes.
It's our way of being.
That is, and connection. We need
Yes.
connection. Without connection, we are nothing.
Absolutely.
Even in dementia research, we see that isolation is more toxic to the brain than anything else. Even more than, I know I harp about the environmental toxins, but social isolation is more deadly.
And so listen, each of you who are grieving, we know that when we're grieving, it's such a double-edged sword. We don't want to be with people. We isolate. It's so painful. And then we feel alone. So be aware of how much time you are in isolation and how much you're allowing people to comfort you. And we all know that as people grieving, we have to educate the people around us that there's nothing wrong with us. There's nothing to fix. We're grieving. Simply come and be with us. But when you say yes to someone saying, may I come over? And simply say, yes, let's go for a walk. That is connection. It's that simple.
And it's mastery. And it is mastery and overcoming your own state by yourself. That's very, very important. We need to take charge. My brand manager, Michelle, this is what she shared with me. She said that she had to go to the doctor, and she said, well, I go to the doctor, to the best doctors, to give me the best advice, but I am the CEO of my health and my life. I get to decide what I'm doing.
That's true. And I really appreciate the word that you just used. My word is to empower people so that they can take that power. And I love what you said is mastery then of your life.
Yes.
So become the master of your life. Because if you're not, who is?
Exactly. That's if you're not, who is?
That's
who
right.
Who is in charge of your happiness, your joy, your success, your abundance, right?
Yes.
So,
yes.
No,
So thank you, Dr. Aruna. There will be links when we post the podcast and put this on YouTube so people can come to your website, because my friends, the listeners, it is a gold mine. Her letter of review of 2019 goes through all the people that she supported to have a wonderful life. And then there's blogs on there from 20, 21, 22. So thank you once again for being so generous with your time, your energy, and your knowledge, because you are making such a difference in the world.
Georgina. That is
You're
so,
welcome.
so good to hear. Thank you so much. And
You're welcome.
likewise.
Thank you. Take deep care.